Hey, Paul.
Hey, Fab.
I went too fast. So for whoever's watching YouTube, there's a glitch at the beginning. All good. So today, quick episode. We'll probably have to dive deeper on this. I think it's a quick intro. Let's put it this way: on personalizing your sales process to maximize your results. Right. So there's a sales process, and we've talked about sales process before a bajillion times. But every industry, every company has, in the end of the day, while we're approaching things similarly, still very different things to do, right? Like that's kind of where we wanted to go with this,
Yep.
right?
Yep. Exactly.
Because and so I still want to kind of follow the same show structure. Like as a sales leader, you need to personalize your sales process, right? It's one thing to go on Google or Chat GPT and write up a sales process for me, right? And it'll do it, but it's going to be generic, which is it's maybe a good foundation to start with. Like you have something to start with. I'm assuming you're not working with you directly, but but then obviously your business is different, so you need to be able to tweak and change and adapt it to your needs,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
So as a sales leader, before we get into the design, and maybe this is just a quick point, is like why are we doing this sales process? What are you hoping your salespeople do with this sales process?
Well, I think that's, I was just going to say, before you even establish a sales process, you said it. What's the purpose of your sales process? Or what's the objective of the sales process? And of course, everyone will say, well, we're trying to maximize sales. We're trying to make it better. We're trying to increase our sales. But more specifically, I think for me, the people or the clients that I've dealt with that have success with their sales process is when they understand how the sales process acts, other than just telling people where to put their notes in on the CRM so that the leaders can go look at it later. We've said this before, but I think a good sales process actually helps the leader understand what's going on with the team. That's the obvious one. Everyone knows that. But it's also a sales assistant to the individual salespeople who are using it on a daily in a daily fashion to ensure that they're going through all the different steps of their personal process to close the sale. So when personalizing it, it's basically saying, okay, how can we create a process that helps my whole team benefit from moving forward in a similar way, so having common semantics, and also helping them know what they should be doing next. So that to me is the main purpose of a sales process, is to help your team have your virtual sales assistant that is helping your team move forward and get closer to a sale, and also qualify a sale and decide, what to do next. And when I say decide, it's sort of mapping out what it is that you do instinctively and making sure that you don't forget things. It would be, as a sales leader, I'd say, so let's say you're building a shed. Well, if you're building a shed, you need to go, you need to buy so much wood, so many nails, whatever, tiles, whatever you're trying to do, cement, and you can wing it. But if you write it down and you create a process, you'll be and say, well, I'll build this first. I'll go, it'll help you walk through that process of building your shed in a better way.
Right, exactly. So I think I like what you said in terms of what are you hoping your salespeople will do with it. It's going to help them close deals, and I realize that a lot of salespeople don't understand that, because I think a lot of sales processes are not well built. Yep. So they're not that's not the first intention. So especially more senior reps, are kind of jaded. They're like, whatever, sales process. Like younger ones are more attentive because they're probably more nervous and they hope to get something that'll help them out. But you're right. I think you want them to use it because for you, it helps you figure things out, but it also helps you scale, right? It's like you said, you talked about a shed, right? At the end of the day, you could wing it, but the reality is that unless you've built 100 sheds before and your plan is in your head, that's an analogy for like a business owner whose sales process is in their head, but you're not going to build a shed, right? Like it's just not going to work, right? Even if you manage to put something up.
And you're right. And let's use that analogy. Even if you've built 100 sheds and the plan's in your head, as a human being, you could just forget one little step. Oh, I forgot the vapor barrier. You've done
Yeah,
it 100 times, but this time you went to the store and you didn't buy the vapor barrier because there's a list
yeah.
of 100 things you need to buy. So
Yeah.
what you
And
what
so process scales. Like if you want
yes,
to scale as a company, you need a process that'll help your salespeople because that's how you can scale, right? If your sales process doesn't help, that isn't a consistent way of helping your salespeople win deals, and it doesn't mean you get a 100% win rate, right? It's still you're still disqualifying leads along the way. It's just it's helping you scale because then you can go and tweak that process, right? If you keep your shed analogy, you could be like, ah man, next time I'm probably going to buy all the material before because now I just found I lost time by going to
yeah,
Home
yeah,
Depot 6 times,
yeah.
right? Um, uh, so that's the point. But you can't optimize if you have no process, right? There's nothing to optimize. There's nothing to improve. All right, so I know we said we would keep this show a little shorter, but as a sales leader, what should you do to kind of personalize that sales process
Personalized.
for you?
Okay, exactly. So first thing is, you and I have talked about this a bazillion times, and a basic sales process will have a preparatory stage, an introductory stage where you're giving your elevator pitch, and then you'll have a discovery phase where you're finding out what the client needs to do. You're going to have maybe, and after that, you'll have a presentation phase, and then you have a close phase, right? Everyone sort of has, I'm really shrinking it down. Um, and then you need to figure out, well, okay, then you need to sit down and interview the best salespeople who do the best things in your company and say, okay, what do you do? Walk me through your sales process. Your walk me through a few of your sales processes, and you interview them, and you really, what are you doing in the preparation stage? What are you saying? What are you checking out? And you really go through it. And you should go through this with, if you've got a team of 100 people, take your 10 best people and walk through the process with them to see how they do it, and then you adjust it, and then you create milestones within the different stages to make sure that you're doing everything that those best practice people do. And if,
Mhm.
if you're really good at that, it represents your business. It represents the language of your business. That you don't just say decision maker. You talk about the names of decision makers in your business. If there's
Mhm.
different factors, different people, different parts of the company you need to involve at different parts of the process, you include them in there. Talk to John in the operations department to build the best quote possible for this situation. If you're responding to RFPs, well, how does that happen? So you're personalizing and making it reflect your reality, and you're mapping out what you do best. And that way, first of all, it reflects your reality. Your salespeople will say, I understand this. This is what we do. So that's how it becomes a sales assistant. And then if you're really good at it, and we've talked about this before, once you've mapped out that process, you've taken the hours to do it, you've mapped it out, then of course you'll integrate it into HubSpot. Um,
Aha.
in there. But then you
I'm the
also
one who
want,
does the plugs usually.
sorry, I did it for you because you're wearing your t-shirt there, so
It's
I
true.
got to
It's
do
already
it.
screaming.
And then so that's how you personalize it. You say, well, what is it that we do along the way? What are the best practices that we can teach to the other 90 reps in the company that are having a little bit of a hard time? So that's also the real purpose of your sales process as a sales leader is to keep your salespeople in tune with what's going to give them the most success.
Yeah, and that's great because I mean it's such a step that we forget, right? Like it's and as somebody who likes playing around in CRMs, like sometimes the idea of having to go talk to people and blah 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 and talking, but that's where the reality happens. And when I do look at sales processes that from the outside, well, from the outside, the first time I see them, look like whoa, this looks really heavy. When I hear the reps talking to me about it, they're like, oh yeah, okay, like this, it's intuitive for them. Like this is how the business needs to be run. And like maybe I'll say like maybe we need to cut this stage, and like how come you're not following all the stages, and like we could tweak and optimize. But versus like a sales process that's clearly not well implemented, like it just goes all over the place. And some companies are maybe more fortunate and have reps that follow the toe the line a bit more, and so they'll abide by it. But overall, like understanding what your top performers are doing is such a key, because then it's almost like the answer is right there, right? Like, well,
The
first
answer
I
is
reach out,
there.
I
Yeah,
reach out to them, then we book a call. I always make sure that so and so is on the call, like the CEO, whatever, whoever you're selling to, and blah 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 is on the call, and then we do this, and then we do that, and then I involve procurement because
yeah,
and then I mean it's all written out. Then you just need to like HubSpot it does it, right?
yeah.
Or
HubSpotize
Salesforce
it.
it
Yeah,
or
yeah, yeah.
Dynamics it or whatever, like
And you're right,
um
Fab. But you said something I want to come back to before we go too far. Is you said it's all there, and it is all there because the
yeah,
people who do the best job, it's all there. You're just mapping it out, so it
yeah,
reflects your reality. But you're reminding yourself of all the good things you've done, and to keep repeating them. And that's
yeah,
a good sales process. Does that? It helps your team achieve those things. And if you have an even bigger company and have a really complex sales process, you should have a playbook because in your playbook is explaining what happens in those stages. In your playbook, I like I like I like virtual playbooks or video playbooks or
mhm,
vlog books or whatever you call them, which really show specifically how to do specific stages of your sales process and
yeah,
maybe show specific role plays. And that'll really help you move forward. So suddenly to the new rep, wow, this is great. There's all this information. I know how to learn my process and there's a playbook attached to it. And to the senior rep, it's just a reminder. Oh yeah, did I? Oh damn, I didn't do that. I forgot to question there. And if we
yeah,
use the shed analogy again, I forgot to buy the little square head screws because I didn't have my list of 100 things how I best build a shed because I didn't take my
yeah,
notes properly.
yeah. So that makes a lot of sense. I mean, it's so funny because it's like it seems like such a big topic, right? How to personalize your sales process, right? So you read your Challenger Sales and your Spin Selling and all those books, and you kind of come out with this generic sales process, but then you need to personalize it, and it feels like a big topic, but the reality is like it's all there. You just need to talk to your staff. I mean, I would maybe even say I don't know, maybe it'll come off wrong, and that's not the intention. But I would also then speak to my worst salespeople and see how they do things, because you really want to be able to identify where the differences are between the good ones and the bad ones, right?
Okay,
Because
and
maybe
caveat
all
there,
yeah,
caveat there. Worse can be two things, right? I think we've talked about this before, but sales to me is just three things. It's action, the actions you take. It's your method, what you
yeah,
do, and then the external forces. So how your client reacts, how your clientele reacts, how the market is doing, all the things that you don't control. So those are the ingredients of results.
yeah.
So in sales, so your worst salespeople might be really good at their methodology. They might be really good salespeople, but they're doing low level of action, so they're really lazy.
Right. I mean, obviously it's more it can be more complicated than that, but usually, if you're talking, I mean, the same complexity happens if you're talking about your best ones, right? They could be the best ones in terms of generating revenue, but the reality is just got lucky and signed one massive client that keeps bringing in yearly revenue, right? Um, so yeah, you have to have a good identification of
What are the qualities you're looking for?
what's quality, like. I'm taking notes at the same time. But and so I mean that could be a good add-on, right? Because maybe everybody's making sure the CEO is there. So okay, that's it's an important step, but it's not. It's going to be a critical step for success. Like it's just a step that everybody's taking. Um, so obviously the third point that we usually would cover is how to operationalize it. And as we're talking about this, I'd like to maybe have a full show on how to operationalize your sales process, because I think that's a bigger conversation, right? Is like uh obviously we use HubSpot as a tool because that's the one I know, but like I think that's where I find a lot of people also fall, right? They kind of know what they do, and then and you introduced me to somebody recently. I spoke to somebody else not long ago. Like then they say in Excel, right? Like or their spreadsheet or their process just ends up being they just don't know what to do. So I think it'd be interesting to maybe have like I don't know if we'll do a live walkthrough. We'll figure out the details of it. But in terms of operationalizing it, I mean, it's all operationalizing, right? Like because having everything documented in a Google Doc or a spreadsheet or something like that is not operationalizing. It's putting it into your CRM, but at the core, basically, you want your stages, your steps, and you want the information you want to to pull to document, sorry, and when you have an entry exit criteria per stage, right? So you make sure
Yep.
that for a deal to move from stage one to stage
Yep.
two, there's some very clear things that you need for it to leave the stage, and very clear things for it to enter stage. Um, and and that's it. Like, I mean, those are the pillars of it, I would say. But beyond that, I think there's a lot more that you need to get done.
Yes,
I mean, you need to
absolutely. And
understand
you're right.
your
We could
tool.
go much more in depth in how to operationalize it. But essentially, today I think we've covered our discussion is that why personalize it? Because it'll help your salespeople do the right thing. And if you don't personalize it, it's like buying a suit off the rack that doesn't fit you.
Yeah,
When you personalize your sales processes, you're buying a suit that fits. You're buying
yeah,
clothing that fits properly. You're having it tailored to your own personal needs. So
yeah,
that's that's the purpose of all this. So, what are your
yeah.
takeaways, Fab?
So takeaways is, well, that's it. Rep focus. I mean, ultimately, at the end of the day, we said rep focus, but it has to be client focused, right? Like, it has to make sense for the client as well, right? Like, if you're asking for a client for a deposit before you even speak to them, like, and that doesn't make sense to them, right? Like, it's just, it has to make sense for the client as well. Like, it's the client's journey through all of this,
So,
but
can I hit pause here for a second
yeah,
because you're right. There's two things. I think the salesperson's journey is the sales process, and I
yeah,
think what you have to consider. You're right. You have to get input from the buyer's journey, which
yeah.
is how the client feels. So, but your sales process is always considering the buyer's journey. Like, what are they going through to influence you to bring it to the next level? So, yes, okay. So
And
keep
I
going.
spoke to somebody once, and I know I'm going off tangent, and I'll bring it back to the takeaways. Is like they had labeled their stages from the customer's perspective, right? Like,
Oh, I like that.
I signed the IO,
Yeah.
right? So that the rep knows what's the behavior that he's or she's looking for
Yeah.
at this stage of the
Yeah.
process,
Yeah.
um, and it helps them make sure that it makes sense for the client to do it
Yeah.
that way, right?
I
Like,
like that. That's a good
uh,
idea.
yeah. And so,
Get
so yeah, my
back
top
to takeaways.
takeaways, brackets, parentheses closed. The process has to help reps close deals, right? Like, I think most sales processes fall short because they don't take that into account, right? They take into reporting into account, they take into all that, but they're not helping reps close deals. I think that's
Yes.
number one. Uh, Two, to personalize it, speak to your top performers, the salespeople, and the people that they involved with them, if they involve procurement or they involve operations or they involve whatever, to understand and then obviously document what they are potentially intuitively doing or
Yeah.
despite your current doing
Yeah.
despite your current sales process. Uh, um, to do that properly, you need to identify what you mean by a good rep. Obviously,
Yeah.
like you said, it's not always just the revenue. Then obviously you need to implement it into HubSpot or Salesforce or Dynamics or Pipedrive or whatever you're using. And then something you mentioned quickly, which but I thought was important, is your enablement tools, right? Your playbooks and all that is
Yeah.
making sure that the reps have access to the right training tools. Your more senior reps might not leverage them as much, but definitely your younger reps, and it helps onboarding as well, right? And so those are my four plus one with what's a good rep takeaway.
Yeah. Perfect. Well, I like it. If I can just add one is
Yeah,
when you're building and personalizing your sales process, consider two things, right? Remember, we had the ingredients we are talking about. So the three ingredients, which are action, methodology, and external forces, which include your client's opinion, and that give you the results. So when you're building your sales process, yes, you might have a number of actions you need to do, but your sales process is really your methodology. It's externalizing and writing down how you go and walk through a step and reminding you of everything you need to do. So it's really built on methodology. So
yeah,
yeah, that's my takeaway today is that really focus on your methodology when building your sales process, your sales
perfect,
methodology.
awesome. Well, this is maybe not as short, maybe a couple minutes shorter than usual, but there we go. Thank you, Aaron. Thanks for everything. We'll talk again next week.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks,
Bye.
Fab. Bye bye.